Welcome, welcome. Here we are on the Unit 3 taxes project. So here we're going to talk about what taxes are, where they go, where they come from, and all that sort of good stuff. We're going to start out by making a copy of this document. We're going to go through the resources section. I, again, highly require and recommend watching this video, which I will upload in a second here. And then there are a couple other required videos along with some required reading, some other videos that are not required, and then a bunch of articles, that you can check out. New Hampshire oriented stuff is at the top, and then we have some Portsmouth stuff just below that. So if you want to check out the more local stuff, those are the top of the links. Beyond that are the more general. So here we're talking about sort of key terms when we're talking about taxes, and a lot of those different things as we go through this list here. Then we get to open questions. So these are just some open-ended questions for you guys. Think about tax stuff. There is a guided practice based on my pay stub, and you'll be finding each of these different fields, and then you'll be looking at a percentage of each of these as it relates to the total regular salary. You will also research the following questions here. So basically, what is FICA? How much is it? Who pays it? What's the difference between a tax credit and a tax deduction? So all of these questions here are really important questions. All can be found within the resources that I've listed, or you can go out and kind of, Google stuff for yourself. The next part of this project is the exploration. This is in Google Sheets. So here we're going to be looking at a bunch of different things. Make sure you go ahead and make a copy for yourself. In this Google Sheets portion of the project, there are going to be things that we use later on here. So here I'm going to have an example of how much an individual is paying when they make $80,000 for 2021 taxes. And then we also have a number of questions based on U.S. government revenue, discretionary and mandatory spending, and discretionary spending in 2021. So when we look at these, just keep in mind 2021 is an estimate, but that's fine. We're just interested in looking at it, so we're going to check it out. So let's jump into the Google Sheets portion of this project. If you do not know what to do on this project, I am going to literally walk you through right now exactly how to do it. I have built this tool myself. I looked for a little while online and I didn't see any 2021 tax tools yet. Basically the reason being is that people aren't even finished paying their 2020 taxes, so nobody's really that concerned about 2021. Basically these taxes aren't due until April of next year, so people are kind of like, we'll make a tool later. I made the tool now. So basically what we're doing here is we're starting with an adjusted gross income. This is what we kind of think of as our salary. There are some nuances to it that could kind of fluctuate a little bit, but by and large, let's think of this as our salary. So this is for an individual who makes $70,000 a year. We're going to use the standard tax deduction of $12,550. So in this, basically what we do is we take the adjusted gross income, subtract off this deduction, and then we get our basically our taxable income. So there are, again, some nuances and different things we could get into details, but we're just going to keep it at a surface level, and this covers the majority of people anyways. The taxable amount with the deduction taken out is just part of like what we have for tax brackets. So the government basically says, if you make between this much and this much, you'll be taxed at this rate, and you get a standard deduction of blah. So that's what this is coming from. There's no like rhyme or reason for this $12,550 other than, obviously there's some reason behind it, but like that's where it's coming from, is from government tables within the IRS. So then we get to the next portion of IRS stuff, which is just given to us, and that's this portion right here. The different rates for each of the respective tax buckets. So when we look at these things, basically we want to think of this as our first bucket, and the first bucket goes from 0 to $9,950. When you are in that bucket, you pay 10% of your income to taxes, and these are federal income taxes. Okay, so when we talk about that, if I said I made $1,000, and this is after my standard deduction, so in total I would have been making $13,550. Okay, I'll just show you this example for $13,550. So if I adjust this to $13,550, standard deduction comes out, that's my $12,550, and I'm left with a taxable income of $1,000. What happens to that $1,000? Well, that $1,000 is going to go to fill my first bucket. Again, that first bucket starts at 0, ends at 9,950. Within that bucket, I am taxed at 10%. So basically, the maximum income allotted in that bucket that I could be taxed on would be 9,950. The max taxes that I could pay in that bucket would be 995. The reason is that's 10% of this 9,950. So the taxes that I have left to pay money on is $1,000, right? What I first started with up here. So I take $1,000, and that's the taxable income within this bucket. So basically I'm saying everything falls in this bucket, and this is the tax that I'm paying on it. This is 10% of the $1,000. This gives me my cumulative taxes paid for that bucket. As I go down, I have now completed, I have paid taxes on all of my income, so I have no more left to pay taxes on. So that's why this just continues to be 100. Kind of boring, but I'll show you just kind of like quick here how it adds up, and then once we get to like 10,000, you'll see it starts to get a little bit more interesting. So again, I'm going to go up kind of by increments of like, I don't know, a few thousand here. So instead of 18,550, instead of 13,550, let's do 18,550. Here we see our total taxable amount is 6,000. It comes into this first bucket, gets taxed at 10%, and that's where we get this $600. So let's make it interesting. Now let's actually hit that full 9,950. So basically what I'm going to be doing is taking 9,950 plus my 12,550. Let's do some quick math here. So that'll give us 10,000. Call this 22,500 here. So this is the amount of income I'd make, adjusted gross income, to cap out my first bucket. If I make $1 more, it's going to be now taxed at the next bucket. And we see that right here. So now we're being taxed at 12% on this $1, which I guess it doesn't show up here because I didn't want to get too detailed, but I guess I'll do this. I'm just going to bump my decimal places a little bit just so we can see this. So here's my taxes in this bucket, and we'll do the same with our cumulative, I guess, as well. And it was already reflected down here, I believe, but maybe not. So now what I'm saying is for that dollar, it's being taxed at 12%, whereas before it was being taxed at 10%. The next bucket is my 12% bucket. That's called a marginal tax bracket. I like saying bucket because it's more fun, but it is technically a marginal tax bracket. Now this is where we get into the term marginal versus effective. Marginal is just the bucket that I end in, okay? So if I made $22,501, I ended up in this 12% bucket. But keep in mind, all of the taxes I paid up to this point were all in the first bucket. All of those got taxed at 10%. Only this dollar got taxed at 12%. When you move from one marginal tax bracket into the next marginal tax bracket, it does not affect all of the money you pay taxes on. It only affects what's in that bracket. So when we have people, the most common misunderstanding about how taxes work in the United States, we have a progressive system. The more you make, the more you will pay taxes on at a higher rate, but it does not affect that earlier stuff. So at any point, if somebody says, hey, do you want a $1 raise? Even if that bumps you into the next tax bracket, you say, yes, please, because that is still more money in your pocket. You will not be paying a higher tax rate on all that earlier stuff. So here, let's make it a little bit more interesting. Instead of just $1, let's add $100. Oops, that was the opposite. Let's do, there we go. So now we have $100 being taxed in this tax bracket, and we see that's an extra $12 here, which brings our cumulative total up to $1,007. So we can see as we progress through, I'm going to bump it up to something a little bit more interesting. Let's do, that's not more interesting, that's way less interesting. You can see if you don't even make the $12,550, you don't have to pay federal taxes because you don't make enough. All right, so now we got all three buckets going here, and we can get into another crazy bucket in a minute. In this example, we have $70,000. We pay $9,950 in the first bucket. The second bucket goes from $9,950 up to 40,525. What that means is there's 30,575 available in that bucket. Okay, so the second bucket has that total max. This is the total max at 12%. And we still have 47,500 left to pay taxes on. We started with 57,450 from right here. That 57,450, we paid 9,950 in taxes on it, and that's how it's being brought down to 47,500. Then we paid taxes on this 30,575, and that leaves us with 16,925 left to pay taxes on. I'm now in my third bucket. This bucket is at 22%. So this 16,925 is being taxed at 22%. That's how we get this amount right here. So let's think about this for a second. In this first bucket here, the 12% bucket, we paid taxes on $30,575. In our third bucket, we're paying taxes on $16,925. We can see we're just paying a little bit more, like 24, whatever, not 24, but let's see, this is 70 plus 20, so like 50 bucks, right? Call it 50 bucks more in taxes on way less, right? 16,925 versus this 30,575. And the reason for that is because this is a much higher tax rate in this bucket, okay? So that's where we see, that's where people complain about, oh, if I make more money, I'm going to be taxed more. Yes, you will be taxed more on those additional earnings, but everything else up to that point still stays in its marginal tax bracket. Let's do a cool example. Let's do like $1 million. This is like how much I make in a year typically. So basically we've got our standard deduction coming out here. We have some massive amount of money. It's going in, it's filling all these buckets, fill. We're all the way into the maximum bucket here, which is anything past 500,000, 23,600. I put a little infinite here because there is no cap on this, right? It's just 37 all the way up. So the money I have left to pay in taxes in this bucket is 463,850. I am paying, a total of 171,000 in this bucket, bringing my cumulative total taxes paid up to 329,000 and some change. Now I'm going to show you guys this purple stuff down here. This is my total taxes paid, just comes from this stuff right here. It's the same, it should match between these two. Next is my effective tax rate. The effective tax rate is the percentage of the total taxes paid relative to my adjusted gross income. Okay, so basically I'm just taking this number, my taxes paid, divided by my adjusted gross income, which we think of as our salary. That's my effective tax rate. We will never, you'll get very close if you made like $1 trillion, but we'll never really get to our marginal tax rate. We'll always be below that. And I'll show you some other examples. So let's just do like 500,000 here, okay? So someone who's making $500,000, they're in that marginal tax rate of 35%, right? That's the highest bucket they're paying on because they're paying on an amount between 209 and 523,000 here. They're only paying an effective tax rate of 14.95%. First and foremost, they have the standard deduction coming out. Then they pay some taxes on this stuff, and then it goes through and they pay, adjusted off all that. Oopsie, I think I adjusted the wrong thing. I totally did. There we go. I was going to say that wasn't adjusting correctly. My bad. So here we go. So now we're saying we, make 500,000, and so our effective tax rate here is 29.03. I was like, that 14 is way too low. So as I come down, we'll see we get lower and lower relative to the marginal, okay? So marginal, where we end up, versus effective is what we're actually paying. So we see someone who's making, 100,000 has an effective tax rate of about 15%, and we see someone with a effective salary of 50,000, their adjusted gross income is paying an effective tax rate of about 8.59%, even though they're in that 12% bucket. So that's how that works. Discretionary income, this last piece here, is our adjusted gross income subtract all of our taxes paid. So here we're just doing what we started out with minus the taxes we paid, and that is what we refer to as our discretionary income. After this, we'll get into disposable income, and that's where we start taking out for expenses. That's all that stuff. Well, let's look at our first example here. Here I have lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, and I'm going to show you how I come up with this total column here. This data is super similar to all this tax data, and all this tax data, and all this tax data, and all this tax data. All that we're going to be doing is we're going to be first and foremost erasing this stuff, okay? So I'm going to get rid of all this, and I'll show you guys exactly how I make it as we go through. There we go. Okay. So how do I come up with a total for a row? Total for a row is going to utilize my sum function. So I'm going to say equals sum, and I'm going to take all three of these right here. It auto-suggested it for me. Thank you, Google Sheets. Would you like to autofill? Oh, I would love to. Thanks, Google Sheets. Cool. There we go. There's our sum function in action. Then I want to know what the percentage of each of these is relative to the total. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit funky. In this cell here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say equals. I'm going to go back up here to lions in 2000, and then I'm going to say divided by, and I'm going to click this total here. I'm going to make one modification to this formula, and I'll show you why. So right now, I'm just going to enter, and I'm not going to do the autofill. I'll do that in a second. If I take this and copy it down, it's going to work fine for me. Every time it drags down, it's dragging down for the year and for the total. Cool, it's exactly what I want. But what if I go to the right? If I drag to the right, this is giving me an error. Why is it giving me an error? Well, it's saying take the value, tigers for 2000, which is what I want, and divide it by, oh, and now it's adjusted, right? It's not pulling the right total. The way that I fix this is in this first cell, I take a $sign and I put it right in front of the letter. That represents a lock on my column, okay? So now when I take this thing and I drag it over, it's not going to have an error here. It's going to copy the right value because it's just taking, whoops, well, it's frozen, so we'll see. There we go. So it's taking the first value and adjusting it, but the second one stays locked. And we see that again. First value is moving over, second value is locked. Now I'll take that first row here, whoops, and I will copy it down. You can do so by double clicking here as long as there's no data right here. So I'm going to get rid of that data, which is why I said I don't want it. I'm going to highlight this first row, see where it turns into a little box right here. I get my little cross, double click, good to go. It auto fills. Another way that you can do this is you can simply take it and drag it down. Same values, same values. Now I want to talk about making a pie chart. Well, to make a pie chart, I want to complete this row of data. How am I going to complete this row of data? I'm simply going to say equals. I'm going to go to this 2015 data here and hit enter. So again, I'm going to drag that over, and now I've got all my values here. So let's make our two graphs. The first is I would like a line chart. So I'm going to highlight all of this data. Another way to do this quickly is hit Control A, and it'll highlight the entire table you've selected. Be careful though, if you've got other stuff connected to the table, it will highlight everything, but that's just a nice little shortcut for you. I'm going to hit Insert, and I'm going to go hit Chart, and then I'm going to change my chart type to a line if it is not already doing so. So let's just say, for example, it gave me an area chart. I would like a line chart, so I go right here to Chart Type, and I select Line, and now I'm good to go. So there I have a fine line chart. I'm going to go to the next section here, and here I want a pie chart. So I'm going to highlight from year all the way down to my bear data here, and I'm going to say Insert. I'm going to say Chart, and it already knows that I want a pie chart, but let's just say, for example, it thought that I wanted a column chart. I'm going to go in and select a pie chart. One of the things that can happen, depending on how your settings are set up, is that it could have the row and column switch not selected, and we could also have the row and column labels not selected. So we want to make sure we do have the right data, and it's pretty quick and easy in terms of doing that. You just select here or don't select here, and then we're going to use these headers right here. So I want a column header, which is the year, lions, tigers, bears, and then I've got the actual year here, and that's my actual data. So here we're using row 55 as labels. So here, year, lions, tigers, bears, and then in terms of my column A as headers, here I've just got the year for this thing, and that's what's defined right here. Not that we really care, but in the future, if you play around with stuff like this, that's helpful. So that is everything in a nutshell. I'm going to show you guys this tab in detail and just show you exactly why it is that it's the exact same. All I'm asking you to do is to look at this table, which I've already simplified these for you. We're looking at fiscal years, okay, of the U.S. government, and here we're looking at tax revenue. So this is the money coming in. There are individual taxes from individual income. There's corporate income taxes. There's social insurance and retirement receipts. Receipts just means income, basically. There's excise taxes, which is like alcohol, tobacco, stuff like that. And then there's an other category as well. If I want the total here, what would I do? I would do a sum function, and look, it already knows what I want to sum. Then from there, I could take that and drag it down. So I'm going to hit enter. I could autofill, so I'm just going to hit autofill. From here, the next big thing is I want to fill this revenue as a percentage, okay? So I want to know what the individual income taxes were as a percentage in 1934. To do that, I'm going to do equals. I'm going to go all the way back up here. I'm going to select that first one, which is individual income taxes in 1934. Then I'm going to say divided by, and I'm going to select this total here. Keep in mind that I want to, so I'm going to hit X here, I want to drag this to the right before I copy it down. If I drag it to the right now, I'm going to get an error, okay? So we know we want to take this and we're going to lock this second cell. We want to lock the column for G because that total is not shifting over. Now I can take it, drag it over, and I've got a full set of data here, right? There's my first row completed. In the bottom, it's showing me it's summing at 100%. Perfect. Now I double click right here to copy for all rows down. Awesome. So that took me what, 10 seconds? Next, I want to put my line graph here. Well, to complete my line graph, I want to select all this data. One thing I want to make sure you guys know is you can click one thing. If you hold down Control and Shift, Control highlights, Control selects data and Shift goes, Shift selects data, Control bumps you. So if I hold down Control and go to the right, it'll bump me to the end. If I hold down Shift and move, it highlights. So if I do Control and Shift and then bump, it'll select the whole thing. So I do Control Shift all the way to the right, Control Shift all the way down, or I could just go in here somewhere and hit Control A. So again, selecting everything for me. Once I have selected it in whatever way I choose, I'm going to hit Chart. And we see here we've got our chart, which we're just going to drag down into this nice little green section right here. And we now have our first chart there. As we see, our individual income taxes have come up over time to offset the decrease in corporate income taxes. We also see Social Security coming up as well. Next, we're looking for 2021 data. How do we do it? We say equals. We go in to our table here. We look for 2021. We go to the first column. We hit enter. And then we just take that and drag to the right. There we go. Now I'm going to select that data. So again, I'm just going to hit Control A to select that whole table there. Insert, chart, pie chart, boom, I'm good to go. If for whatever reason this stuff wasn't selected, we know we just want to turn it on. So just make sure we add those things. And here we see that individual income is making, or individual income taxes is making up 50% of all the U.S. Taxes for 2021. So you're going to basically go ahead and do that for practice 2. Only thing different is I have you add one more little subtotal. Subtotal for discretionary, which is the discretionary stuff highlighted here. Subtotal for mandatory. This is all my mandatory stuff. And then a total. It's the only thing different. All the rest of this is the same. I've got you coming up with 2 tables, one for the subtotal for discretionary and mandatory, and the other one for basically by category. Practice 3, same stuff. Come down here. We see it broken out. We're going to make a percentage table. Then we're going to make a pie chart. We're going to do the same thing for practice 4. And that is the project in a nutshell. There's a lot of stuff we can talk about taxes, which we'll do in class. In a nutshell, if the only thing you take away from this is kind of like high level where the taxes are coming from, where the taxes are going, and you understand that we have a progressive tax system for federal income tax, which means the more you make, the more you will pay, but it's not on the full amount. So if you ever get an opportunity to get a raise and it bumps you into the next tax bracket, just say giddy up, take that raise, because you will ultimately be making more money. Okay, bye.